Hey guys, welcome back to the Vintage Watch Guy. Today I want to talk about the topic of vintage watches as investments. You may have heard from some people, especially vintage watch dealers, vintage watches, the price is always increasing, they're not made anymore. You hear from a lot of people, they are a good investment. Let's invest in watches, especially vintage watches. Now, let me just go over a little bit of information about watches. Let's just think this concept through, and see if this makes sense. So when you buy a watch, most frequently you'll buy it from a dealer, some sort of dealer. Maybe someone who has a store, and maybe somebody who has a jewelry booth. If they have a physical store, they have expenses. They have to pay their staff. They have to pay their rent. They have to pay utilities. They have all this money tied up in their merchandise that they bring in. They pay for insurance. So they have a lot of expenses. Online dealers may have less overhead, but they still have expenses. They have to do marketing. Some of them produce a lot of content, including, in some cases, very good YouTube videos. They have to source the watches. They may have to do travel. So when you're a dealer of some sort and this is your living, you need to make a margin on each watch. The other option that you have, other than buying from dealers, is to buy directly from a collector. Problem is, where you're going to find another collector who has the watch that you want. There's a lot of websites that facilitate this. There's eBay, obviously. There's Chrono24. But in these cases, these websites need to make their money too, so you have to pay a lot of fees. You have to pay, if you're buying from eBay, you have to pay the eBay fee. You have to pay PayPal fees as well, potentially, shipping fees, taxes. A lot of times, even when you buy online, depending on your state, you may have to pay taxes as well. So between either paying margins or paying fees to the middleman, sort of online broker website that you use, you've already lost a significant percentage of the value of the watch just in these fees and taxes and so on. So in most cases, unless you're buying the watch directly from a friend with cash, you have to consider that, everyone needs to make a living, and, the dealer needs to make their margin so they can keep their business going. And the online middleman broker that you use also needs to make a fee. The only time you can really buy truly wholesale, I think, is when you buy from a wholesale. They have these sort of watch fairs, you might call them. I looked into going to one of these at one point, but the membership fee, you have to be a member of this organization, which is quite a hefty fee. Then you have to pay to go to the watch fair. You have to find time to go. For those of us that have full-time jobs, we have other things to do besides collect watches, unfortunately. So, so to pay a few $1,000s to go to a fair to buy one or two watches really doesn't make sense. People only go to these fairs when they are dealers and they're, doing many, many transactions and involving large amounts of money. So then, so as you buy, you have whatever amount you pay is increased by the margin, by the fees that you pay. Excuse me. When you sell, on the other hand, you have a sort of a different problem. When someone's a watch dealer, they have a certain reputation. If they have a store, they have their customers, they have a reputation, they've been there for many years, they've done many, many transactions with different satisfied customers over the years. If they're an online store, they have also a reputation to maintain. People review, is this a safe place to buy a watch? So they also have, over time, with many transactions, they build up a reputation. However, you as an individual watch seller, a collector, unless you do many transactions, if you're one of these people on the forums who's constantly buying and selling, you may also have built up a reputation. But if you're just sort of the average Joe, you don't have that kind of reputation. So you without that history, without that record, people have to give this, you have to discount what you sell. You don't provide that value of a reputation. If sellers, they also may offer to guarantee the watch movement for a year, offer some kind of guarantee of authenticity, you can return it. But these kind of guarantees are hard for you to offer as an individual collector who wants to sell a watch. Do you really want the person to return you ship the watch to them, they return it to you, you have to ship it back to them, you have to bring it to a watchmaker, service it, the person's emailing you. If you have a day job, you just don't really have time to do this. It's not really worthwhile. When you're dealing with these watch dealers too, they do offer a valuable service. They curate the watches, they put them all together in one place, they inspect them, they offer sort of a guarantee that they work. They search, they go to watch fairs, they scour in different places, and they bring these watches together for you so you don't have to. They sort of do the legwork. And they also act as a guide to providing their expertise, especially with vintage watches. If you don't have expertise, you probably shouldn't be buying, but if you want to buy and you don't have that expertise, or if the area is sort of esoteric, buying from a dealer who has expertise, brings it to you, that is a valuable service that they provide. So, it is worth it to pay that in many cases. So, when someone buys from you, when you're not a dealer, you don't have a reputation, you don't have a long transaction history, there's certain risks for buying from you. People, who are you? Who is this guy? So when you have risk in any kind of economic transaction, you have a discount. If I buy, for example, a company issues a bond and the company's in a lot of financial trouble, the company will offer a higher rate of return on the bond. If the company, or if it's, for example, the US government, and they guarantee the money, they can always get money to pay you back, their rate of interest is very, very low. But if the company's having some trouble, or say, the bond is being issued by Puerto Rico and not the US Treasury, and there's a lot of problems there, then you have to pay a much higher interest rate. So there's always a discount for the amount of risk. The more risk, the more discount. And buying from you without a reputation is a risk, so people are going to discount it. Part of that discount is that most people will assume, sophisticated buyers will assume, that if you're buying a watch from private hands, the watch is probably going to need a service. So they're going to take out, the amount of money for the service. Also, there's the fees from eBay or Chrono 24. And if you're selling to a dealer, it might be easier because the dealer may be looking to buy the watch, but the dealer has to make their margin, so they'll subtract their margin from what they pay you. And they also will assume the watch needs a service and needs to be inspected, and they will, remove what they think is a fair price for that as well. So let's just do a hypothetical example. So say a watch is $1,000 wholesale. Let's make the numbers easy. So you buy the watch from a dealer. The dealer needs to make a margin. Say the margin's 30%. So you add $300. Then you add in your sales tax. Where I am in New York, the sales tax is 8.875%. But let's make it easy. Let's say 10%. So make the numbers easy. So another $100. Then there's shipping that you have to pay for. You have to insure it, so it's expensive. So let's say that's another around $50. So by now you've paid $1,450. You paid $1,450. Another 45% margin on the wholesale price. The dealer gets 30%, and the rest is fees and shipping and all that. Then say you go to sell. Can you get $1,000 for that watch? Well, the guy doesn't know you. You have no reputation. If you were another watch dealer, you want to sell the watch, $1,000 was sort of the wholesale price. You get your costs back because they know you. Okay, everybody knows this guy, but you're not somebody who everyone knows. People don't want to pay you $1,000. Who's this guy? So so they'll start subtracting things. Subtract the service cost. Let's say $200. Subtract subtract fees from PayPal or eBay, Chrono 24. If you use eBay, the fees I think are around 13.5%. If you use Chrono24, 6.5%. So let's say 10%, make it easy, average it out, $100. They don't want to pay for the shipping, so they subtract the shipping fee, $50. So you end up with $650. You paid $14.50. You get less than half of what you paid. Now, if you negotiate a little bit, you got the dealer to accept a smaller margin, take 10% off, 15% off, maybe you'll get back half of what you put into it. If you paid sticker price and then you paid for, let's say, you wanted the watch to be refreshed, you paid for a service, another $200, you paid for a new crystal, plus tax, well, you might even be worse off than that. Not to say that every transaction is like this. I've sold watches, sometimes I've made a very small amount of money. Sometimes I've made, 75%. But, this kind of scenario is not that far off. It really isn't. I think when you think about the watch, oh, well, yesterday it sold for 1,000. Tomorrow it sold for, 1,300. Yeah, obviously with vintage watches, people are more interested in the higher prices. So, okay, the watch sold for 30,000 and tomorrow is 35,000. Well, you're not getting 35,000. You're not the dealer. The dealer has expenses also. He's not getting 35,000 either. You have to subtract, all the fees involved, the expenses, and it's not like it's a stock. Like stock is liquid. You buy and sell. You buy a stock today, you sell it tomorrow. You get the money. The fee is very low. In a lot of cases now it's zero to buy and sell stock. So you get that. You get the money. You just have to pay taxes on your profit. But in the case of a watch, it's just not a very liquid investment. Like it's, like kind of like a house. If you want to buy and sell a house, well, you got to pay, a lawyer. You got to pay taxes, pay fees. But those fees really add up, and it's not so easy. It's not like it's not like a stock market. It's not a totally easy, transparent thing with low fees. So in general, I would say buying from a dealer financially, in the vast majority of cases, is a losing proposition financially. You can look in other places. You can try to get a better deal. The watch forums are a good place to look. People who are able to sell on a watch forum, they're people who have reputations. They've been posting a lot. People know who they are. They won't just let anybody sell on there. But, when you're dealing with collectors, the collectors may be looking to unload their lemons. They may be looking to unload a watch that, they bought for not too much money, and they'll sell for not too much money. But the watch, is from some company that doesn't exist anymore. The parts are impossible to find. The watch runs 5 minutes fast and there's no way to fix it. Or the fix will be very expensive. eBay is also, you can sometimes find a good deal, but I think people know eBay now. People are constantly scouring eBay looking for deals. There's also this potential for getting lemons. As I said before, the more risk, the more discount. So if you take a risky proposition, you could do really well, and pay a really good price for a good watch. But at the same time, you could get burned. You could easily get burned as well. If you have the really, the more rare cases now where the pictures are really blurry, well, maybe the watch underneath is perfect, but maybe the watch underneath, it's a redial, the parts are wrong, the watch, there are parts of it that are flawed, that the loom is falling off, the chips are all in the movement. The more risk, the more potential upside, but also the more potential downside. So for me, collecting is about passion. It's not about trying to make money or keeping the money that you spend. I would say watch out for dealers who tell you that watches are investment. They're certainly an investment for them, but not for you. For them to tell you an investment is just a sales tactic to make you psychologically justify spending the money on the watch, spending more money than you meant to. In addition to the watch not being very liquid, There's also costs associated with the watch. You may need to pay, if it's a very expensive watch, you may need to pay to insure it. You may need to pay to store it somewhere. The watch has service costs. If you're wearing it, it may need a service. And I think another problem with watches as an investment, this whole concept, is watch is subjected to wear and tear. I mean, if you take the watch, you put it in a climate-controlled, sealed, safe deposit box, for eternity. Well, is that why you bought the watch? Are you a speculator or are you a collector? To me, if you buy a watch, you should wear it. You don't have to wear it every day, but in case you have to wear it at least occasionally, and then it becomes subject to wear and tear. And also the watch can be lost. It can be stolen. It could rain, and the seals on the watch are no good. If it's vintage watch, it may not have been waterproof when it was made. And it's much less waterproof now than it was. And it rains, water may get all into the movement, and you may not notice right away. The watch may become rusty. Dial could be damaged. You could just whack the thing into a doorknob and just break apart that can't be replaced. You might be making a YouTube video and you just drop the watch onto the floor and you just destroy the watch, put a huge dent in it and damage the movement. So I'd say, don't buy into the hype. Don't pay a crazy price. Some of these guys, the price they're asking is really high. Don't buy into the hype. Pay, yes, they need to make a living. If you really love the watch, you appreciate what the dealer's doing for you. Yes, pay them, good money, but don't pay, one place you see the watch for one price and then then the dealer you see the price for, 5 times as much. Don't buy into the hype. Save the money, buy a nice strap, buy good service, get the watch cleaned up, or buy, a better watch with the money that you save. So, it's like to show some examples now, some different watches. So this one, I would say for this watch, it just goes to show that just because the watch is rare doesn't mean that the watch is necessarily valuable. This watch is made by a company called Croton, which was affiliated with NVIDIA Grenshin. I mean, it's not a very well-known brand. The watch itself, I've never actually seen another watch like this. I've looked also online. I've never seen a watch like this on eBay, this particular model. But, just because it's rare doesn't mean it's valuable. Watch like this, can go for between $100 and $200. So just because that's a good example that just because a watch is rare, supply is basically zero. Well, a small supply, also small demand. This watch illustrates two things. It's also similarly rare. It's a Memomatic, Omega Memomatic, which was made for a short time in the 70s. Alarm watch with automatic winding, both movement and the alarm are both automatically winding. It was the first watch we made like that. I think, as far as I know, it's the only watch that's made like that. Similar movement was used also in some other watches provided by Lemania to some other companies, which aren't that common. But the Omega movement had some modifications to the movement. I think the quick set date was only for Omega, so these watches are not especially common. But they're out there. They're most commonly seen with a gray dial. This one has a more unusual dial. It's a Seamaster branded Memomatic. It has the blue dial, which is less common than blue seconds hand. And then actually the most interesting thing about this watch is the case. This particular case was made for some other companies, but that has the Lemania movement, but not the Omega branded Lemania movement. The Memomatic actually didn't come in this case officially, and there's this sort of obscure article about Memomatics that I saw on one of the watch forums that talks about this particular case. And this particular case is very uncommon, is very rare. And actually, it wasn't in any of the Omega archives, and they researched and they found that, yes, this is the original case, but sort of like the paperwork is mislaid. The case, it was only put in this case, it's only made for like over a 2-year period. So it's a very rare watch, you know. But the thing with Omega, when I look at Omegas, what it reminds me of is Omega Mania, which was a big auction that was in 2007, where the people paid crazy prices for Omega. It was like Omega was going to be the next Rolex. It was going to be the next Patek. Omega is amazing. The vintage is amazing. Which, you know what? The vintage is pretty amazing, but you know, the heights reached in that auction, you know, it's never like skyrocketed like that again, really. Prices have really been stable. So that's an example that, when I think about it, it is, when I look at this watch, what I was trying to illustrate, besides the rarity, was that, you know, there can be bubbles. You know, right now everyone's looking for a steel sports watch. Everyone wants a Rolex, a Patek, but, you know, there have been bubbles in the past, and it's quite possible there could be bubbles in the future. This bubble back, which I showed in the previous video, is a good example of bubbles, bubble back, pun semi-intended. So bubble backs had a very big bubble in the 80s and 90s. The Japanese were very interested in this kind of watch, which fueled like a lot of hype about the bubble back. The prices went sky high at that time period. It's actually, in a way, very unfortunate for bubble backs, because a lot of bubble backs, rather than being preserved in their original condition, were sort of like trotted out, given a new coat of makeup, by which I mean the dial was repainted, and then they were sold at auction for astronomical prices. So it's very rare to find a bubble back with the original dial today, especially the ones with lume. You know, a lot of them originally had radium lume, and you see some like really bad relume jobs, unfortunately, for bubble backs. But bubble back's a good example. You know, at that time, Japanese collectors super into it. You know, then Japan went into a recession. Small watches sort of fell out of favor. You know, bubble backs are very small. This one I think is either a 30 or a 32. That's pretty typical. I mean, they have the larger semi-bubbles that came later in the 50s more. This is more of like a 40s watch. The semi-bubbles are bigger and more popular now, but the original bubble backs this size, they're not very, you know, they sort of, you know, have a stable value, and the ones with the original bracelet especially can be quite valuable, and also having a hooded lug, which makes the watch appear to be bigger, where the watch case extends out like this. That also adds to the value of bubble back. But bubble backs, you know, they had a bubble, and then the bubble collapsed, and they sort of held steady ever since then. So, you know, the fashion can change. Small watches can fall out of favor, and then, you know, things can change. So steel sports watches may not always be in favor. Maybe 40 years from now, everyone will want a solid gold rectangular watch in a 30mm case, you know. Who knows? This is a watch I bought, sort of bought into the hype a little bit. You know, I bought this watch, you know, Breitling, this was about a year ago or year and a half ago. You know, Breitling had come out with a Premier line that year. They had sort of refreshed the line, had some vintage inspired, you know, styling. You see they've, under the new management, they've continued that. Is it George Kern? George Kern is the guy now, the guy who used to be the IWC guy. You know, you see they're doing vintage. You know, they had that Navitimer release, which was like almost a one-to-one recreation of that 806 AOPA Navitimer. Beautiful, beautiful watch. So, you know, I thought, well, you know, Breitling Premier. First of all, I like the watch. You know, it's a beautiful watch. Like, it has original radium hands, radium syringe hands, beautifully blued. The dial is in very good shape. You know, the case is in good shape. You know, the printing on the back is super sharp. Very cool watch. You know, the serial number dates it to 1945. That's right after World War II, when Breitling was making these amazing, beautiful watches right after the Second World War. I love it. But I will say, you know, when I was buying the watch, I was just to justify the price myself, which I paid a premium for the condition. I bought it from a dealer who's, you know, a very good dealer, has some really excellent watches in his case. You know, I said, well, you know, the Premier, the prices are going to go up. I haven't seen the prices do squat, you know. Maybe because the Breitling, the brand, is still sort of out of favor right now. It's not hot. I haven't seen the price of this watch increase. If anything, it's maybe a little less. Certainly not what I paid for it. I haven't seen Premiers going for super high prices. People ask, but I don't know if they're getting those kind of prices. But, you know, I love the watch. You know, I don't regret purchasing it. It's a very cool watch. It's in great condition. It's beautiful. You know, it's paired beautifully with the strap that came with it. It's a great watch, but it's not really an investment. And it was sold to me as an investment. I used that to sort of justify the price, but it's not an investment. I was sort of kidding myself. This is another watch. You know, at the time, the movie Crazy Rich Asians had just come out, and I was still sort of buying into this hype around vintage watches and said, well, oh, it's the Crazy Rich Asians watch. This is the one Henry Golding wore. The price is going to go up. All those, you know, Asian investors, Asian customers will want this watch. I'm Asian myself. I wanted the watch, to be honest with you. I bought this one. You know, I paid a good price for it. The condition is like perfect, beautiful. Onyx, inlaid onyx markers. Beautiful original dial, sharp case. But did this watch, did it go up? Did I buy it at the price that I paid, and then 6 months later, that's Crazy Rich Asians, everyone wanted one, the price went crazy and doubled, tripled in price? No, the price, it's the same. It may be about the same, maybe a little less. You know, so I don't regret it. As I said, you know, I love this watch. It reminds me of that movie. I think it was a big thing for the Asian community in the United States, Asian Americans. But, you know, to say it's an investment piece, it wasn't. It was something I bought out of my love of watches, you know, love of the movie, the cultural moment. It's not an investment, but it is beautiful. I do love it. So that's my video today. You know, please, if you enjoy the video, please like, subscribe. You know, I really enjoy making these videos for you guys. I'd like to see if you want to leave a comment. Tell me I'm crazy. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you hate vintage watches and you don't know why you're watching the channel. Well, please go for it, you know. And see you in the next one.